On this week's video, we are going to be assembling the top end of my LS2 from my 2006 C6 Corvette budget build. We're going to be putting on heads, putting on rockers, a cam, push rods, assembling the accessory drive, and all in all just completing this LS2 for my budget build Corvette build that I paid $4,500 for. And this motor is also on a budget, hence why I didn't get all ARP hardware, paint anything crazy. So let's get right into the video. I'm going to be reassembling the full top end of this motor. I got a Brian Tooley red hot camshaft. I have freshly assembled 243 heads with Brian Tooley valve springs. I got the bottom of the head all cleaned up. I also have every gasket basically for the whole top end. Now let's go ahead and start assembling. First step on assembling this motor, we are going to be installing the red hot cam. BTR red hot. You see that pepper on it? That means it's going to be hot. It's going to be spicy, choppy, you know. Now I've actually never done this before, so please bear with me. I've seen some videos, you know. So the cam's about a quarter of the way in there. We're going to assemble some more assembly lube. And now, this seems intimidating, you know. Like when I was watching videos, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to assemble this motor. Even though we're not messing with the rotating assembly, it's still, you know, whatever. So if you've never done this before, don't be intimidated. You just gotta get your hands dirty, you know, and start figuring stuff out. There ain't a hole you won't be able to get yourself out of. So we're on the last percent of the cam. I saw a trick online, you put water pump bolts on the end to act as a handle. Alright, cam's all the way in. So next up we have our cam retainer plate, which is just 4 bolts, and for torques, you torque them to 11 foot-pounds. And installation is pretty simple. Slide that hog in there. And they already have Loctite on them, some blue Loctite. You don't want the red stuff, that's never come off juice. That's only you put on oil filters. The retainer plate is on for the cam. Now we're going to go ahead and install the cam gear. And for this, the motor has to be top dead center, so the dot on the crank aligns with the dot on the cam gear. Alright, so I got it all set up. I got the cam gear on along with the cam bolts are on and the timing chain. All this goes on in one assembly. How this works is the timing gear has to be aligned with the dot on the crank, and there's a dot on the timing gear. Rotating assembly is at top dead center, and basically the lines you put the chain on and it all goes on in one shot. It took me a minute to figure out, hence why I didn't record it. Now what we have to put on is the chain tensioner. Alright, I have entirely no idea what I'm doing, so. Alright, so now these oil pump bolts get torqued to 18 foot-pounds. Now we're going to go ahead and put the windage tray on. Simple, it's marked the rear. That goes towards the rear of the motor. Alright, so now that we got everything installed, pickup tubes on, everything is torqued to spec, literally not just joking this time. We're going to wipe everything down and we're going to put the oil pan on. Alright, so on goes the gasket. I don't think I'll need any RTV, but I'm still going to put it in certain areas, like the back area over here. Alright, so I got some silicone on the oil pan, and I put silicone at the rear and the front of the motor as well. I'm just going to go ahead and plop this sucker on. Alright, oil pan is all torqued down. Now, we're going to go ahead and put on this timing cover. Alright, we are actually going to switch our attention to start assembling the top end because I broke the sensor in the timing cover, and plus it's having trouble getting the seal out. So we're going to switch our attention, like I said. we're gonna drop these lifters in. Wham, 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 wham. I have them here soaking in oil for the past week plus. So let's get them in. Now we're putting another set of lifters in. Never done this before, so if you guys have any tips or tricks for next time, let me know. Even though they slid right in this time. Now we're just gonna put the bolt in. And now we're gonna put our third set of lifters in. Now for our third set of lifters, just pouring some assembly lube in there. Like butter, you know? We're probably doing something right if they're going in like that. Now the last set of lifters to slide in. Alright, well now we have our freshly milled heads and freshly assembled heads going on the block next. Everything functions, everything moves, everything's lubed up and good. The cylinder walls are clean. It's ready to start closing this thing up. So now we are going to put the driver's side of the head on, which is this one. Alright, now some of you might call me crazy, but a buddy of mine named Larry told me an old timer trick is if you spray the gasket with copper spray a gasket, it improves longevity and strength. And I asked a couple people because I was doubting his theory. I'm like, is that true? They're like, maybe yes, maybe not, but it won't hurt. Okay? So we're gonna spray this stuff on and hope we don't blow a gasket, you know? Alright, now I was told just 2 light coats on either side. Alright, let's put the head on. Alright, gasket's going on. Alright, now we got the head going on. Alright, for these head bolts, I do have some ARP assembly lube on there. Okay, so now for torquing the cylinder head, I have, you know, the torque sheet, and then I also have the sequence on how to torque the head, or the order you torque the bolts in, which is 1, 2, 3. You know, you get the point. So basically, cylinder head is 22 foot-pounds. Second pass, 90 degrees. Final pass is 70 degrees. All right, so I went ahead and got all this torqued down. Since it was my first time doing it, I really wasn't looking to record it because I got no idea what I'm doing. So now we're gonna jump to the other side. All right, so we got the gasket on. Now we're gonna go ahead and lower this head down. All right, and so now the first pass on all of these head bolts is 22 foot-pounds, and then the second is 90 degrees, and the third pass is 70 degrees. So now we're gonna start with the number 1 head bolt, which is the bolt that's directly in the middle. This goes to 22 foot-pounds. Now the number 2 head bolt, which is right beneath the first head bolt. Number 3 is next to number 1. Now we're on the second pass with these heads, which is 90 degrees. And this is where this starts getting tricky. It starts getting real hard to tug on these things. There's 90. Now number 2. There's 90. All right, so now for the third pass, which is 70 degrees, I already did one on 70. Now it's time to go from 2 to 10. And this is where it starts getting hard, because now you've got a ton of pulling force on this thing. You know, you just start pulling and you make sure you pull this thing slow and steady. There's 70. Now on to number 3. Make sure you pull slow and steady, like I said. Because if you slip off this wrench, you're going to have a bad day. 70. Little pause in the video because I had to stop. I was like, why is this head flush with the block? And why is there this space? I got worried here for a second. I was like, no way I could mess this up. And then I looked up images of a long block and I'm right. Okay? I think. If I'm not, I don't know. And there you have it. All the heads are torqued to spec, literally. Okay, so I went ahead and installed the balancer and the timing cover. I didn't know what I was doing because you gotta align it, so it took me quite some time to figure it out and to get the crank bolt all torqued, and you know, I'm new, okay? Don't yell at me. So now we got the valley pan gasket, and we're gonna put this thing on, okay? And then the top end of this motor is just about done, and then we have the accessory drive. And I've never done this before, but I'm gonna put a little dab of silicone just on each one to make sure they stay, you know? All right, so now the valley cover bolts, the torque spec is 18 foot-pounds. All right, now we're gonna finish assembling the head. We got Brian Tooley valve train components, you know, push rods. Got them all in a bag here. We're just gonna go ahead and put one in at a time. There we have it. Let's go ahead and grab the rocker arm assembly. Can't forget the assembly lube. Pour a bunch of assembly lube on there. On goes the rocker guide. Alright, so I have this side all complete. Sorry to record it, I don't know what I'm doing, so this video will be a half hour long if I'm recording everything. So now, we're gonna jump onto this side, and I'll record most of this part. Can't forget the assembly lube. Alright, let's slap these rockers on. I'll tell you what, after you do one side, you definitely learn how to do it better for the second. So before we torque these rockers to spec, you better bet I'm putting more assembly lube on here, brothers. Why? Because if it blows up, at least we won't have to question the assembly lube. Okay? The torque spec for these components are 22 foot-pounds. 22. Alright, so now that we have every single bolt torqued to spec, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the motor a decent amount of times, and then we're going to go over each one again and retorque them. Time to set the intake on here is pretty self-explanatory. You just set this thing on. You know what I mean? And now we're going to go ahead and plop this water pump on. Alright, so the first pass on these water pump bolts is 11 pounds. Now this ratchet, this torque spec doesn't do 11 pounds. So I'm simply just going to read it. And when it goes to 11, I'm going to stop. And then on the second pass is when we're going to listen to the beeps. Now for the last pass on these water pump bolts, it's a final torque spec of 22 foot-pounds. There's 22. 22. Now it's time to put the alternator bracket on, and power steering bracket, and an idler, you know. I got the power steering on already. It honestly took me a minute to figure it out because I didn't take any pictures on the disassembly, which is always a good thing to do. And now for the starter, there wasn't one in there, so I was like, you know what? Let me get a good starter so this one won't overheat and it won't crank. And it's something that's small and powerful. I went with the Power Master Performance Starter, you know? Okay? It's nice, small, compact, high torque, efficient, good starter. I've used these in the past, never gave me problems. But now we're gonna slap this hog on. First things first with a starter, you gotta make sure this thing has a good ground. Make sure your block is nice and clean. You know, good fitment, good ground, good connection, all that good stuff, okay? And now this starter actually doesn't work with this sensor here. So what's great about these starters is there's two Torx size 25 little nuts here. Now you can unscrew these and actually twist the actual starter itself to avoid any obstructions. All right, on goes the valve cover. The gasket must have stretched. The one that was on here was basically brand new, so I'm just gonna reuse it. I think it stretched, so I'm gonna have to put a new one on. But just for now, we're gonna button this thing up. On goes the coil pack assembly. It's pretty simple, just 2 bolts. Now for the part I'm pretty excited for is to install these long tube headers. Pretty sure they're Texas Speed, I'm not sure. I got the full system used from headers to tips. So I think people saying they're Texas Speed, he was saying they're Cooks, but there's no badge on them. I don't know, I paid $1,000 for, apparently it's a Corsa Extreme, but also I called Corsa and they think it's a Corsa Sport system, but either way I paid $1,000 for headers, mid-pipe, and tailpipes. You know, whole thing, $1,000, so not bad. So we're gonna go ahead and just nicely put these headers on.